The surviving students stand paralyzed, their eyes wide with terror as a sudden, violent tremor shakes the ruined landscape around them. The terrified student who accidentally bleeds on the monster's roots is suddenly hoisted upside down. Before he can process his doom, he is brutally crushed, thick streams of blood running down his lifeless face. The source of the horror reveals itself. The supposedly dead giant plant erupts into a colossal, nightmarish monster with a tooth-filled maw. It clamps its jaws down, swallowing the bleeding student whole as the others watch in disbelief. As the beast devours its prey, scattering blood across the stones, the system announces a grueling new mission. They have to survive in the ruins for 69 days with a strict warning to avoid the monstrous S-rank plant now hunting them. Staring up at the towering beast, the students realize they face an impossible S-rank threat. Suddenly, a bizarre, flower-like creature pops out of the earth and greets the terrified survivors with a surprisingly cheerful tone. The entity reveals a disturbing pale green face with 4 glowing red eyes and a jagged smile. It cheerfully introduces itself as the cute guide fairy of the 3rd underground floor. The students stare at the new guide in dread, cursing their luck that yet another twisted fairy has appeared to rule over their suffering. The 4-eyed fairy gleefully explains the rules of their new nightmare. It frames the task as a simple survival mission, reminding them they only have to stay alive for 69 days. However, the fairy pauses and corrects itself, noting that since one student has just been eaten, the calculation changes. The fairy's grin widens to show its sharp teeth as it announces they now only have to hold out for 68 days. The system immediately updates to reflect this grim reality, confirming the timer drops by 1 day due to the sacrifice, while repeating the impossible task of avoiding the monster. A purple-haired student starts sweating nervously as he processes the fairy's words. A dark realization dawns on him as he asks if the survival time decreases simply because someone dies. His expression hardens with desperate intensity as he presses the fairy for an answer, asking if the survival days will keep dropping as the number of survivors dwindles. In response, the 4-eyed fairy leaps high into the air, landing gracefully on the head of the giant plant monster. Standing confidently atop the terrifying creature, the fairy cheerfully confirms his suspicion. It announces that this survival mission comes with specific conditions. First, as they guessed, the required survival days decrease alongside the number of living participants. Holding up a finger, it reveals a second horrifying condition. The giant monster has to eat exactly 1 person every single day. It casually adds that the beast isn't picky and doesn't care whether its meal is dead or alive. The purple-haired student yells in frustration, furious that the fairy calls this a simple mission when the reality is a twisted game of sacrifice. Desperate to survive, he tries to rally the others. He points out that the monster appears deeply rooted in the ruined building and cannot actually move. He urges everyone to ignore the twisted rules and just run. Though Grenouille quietly questions why anyone should listen to a traitor like him, the fairy's voice soon echoes with a chilling warning, advising them not to even think about escaping. The fairy's face twists into a shadowy grin as it clarifies their fatal mistake. The monster isn't stuck. It just hates moving because physical effort makes it hungrier. The purple-haired student freezes in terror as the fairy implies that if the beast moves, 1 human a day will no longer satisfy its appetite. Instantly dropping its terrifying mood, the fairy smiles cheerfully again and tells the students not to be discouraged. With a flick of magic, small wrapped gift boxes pop into the survivors' hands. It explains these are special gifts to help them out, noting the boxes can randomly contain stat-boosting candies, food, or weapons. The purple-haired student stares down at the gift box in his hands, hoping it might contain a powerful artifact. As he eagerly unties the ribbon, a massive set of jaws dripping with saliva suddenly snaps open right in front of his face. The 4-eyed fairy just smirks. A terrifying mimic monster violently erupts from the tiny box. Before the boy can even scream, the creature's massive jaws clamp over his head, brutally devouring him in an explosion of blood while the surrounding students recoil in terror. His headless body slumps to its knees as the fairy cheerfully finishes its warning, advising them to be careful of mimics. Immediately, the system updates the mission, dropping the survival time to 67 days to account for the latest casualty. The gruesome sight shatters the resolve of another student. Tears streaming down his face, He screams that he hates the twisted mission, the deadly boxes, and the entire tower. He collapses into the dirt beside the fresh corpse, sobbing and begging to leave. Complete chaos and panic consume the survivors. One boy angrily yells that the insane rules are a demonic trap designed to make them slaughter each other. Another student argues back, pointing out that defying the rules will just get them all massacred by the monster anyway. Amidst the frantic shouting, a calm hand is raised into the air. A well-groomed student with swept-back hair steps forward, smoothly calling for the crowd's attention to quell the panic. This composed student, Arthur Gordon Pym, the vice president of the third-year class, addresses the survivors with a solemn expression. He gravely acknowledges that their new reality will force them to make incredibly cruel and difficult decisions. Radiating a confident aura, Arthur urges the desperate students to push aside their fear and focus solely on the immediate problem. The panicked survivors look up to him with relief, grateful that a capable senior has stepped up to lead them. Beneath his reassuring facade, however, Arthur smiles sinisterly to himself, celebrating how perfectly he has taken control of the chaotic situation. Turning toward the towering plant monster, Arthur calmly announces that their first order of business is to select the required sacrifice for the following day. He smoothly asks the tense crowd if anyone has ideas on what criteria they should use to choose the victim. Arthur's dark, selfish motives are clear in his inner thoughts. He smirks, calculating that by organizing the students and controlling the panic, he will establish himself as an essential leader, guaranteeing his own name will never be on the sacrifice list. One of the students, desperate for any order, wipes sweat from his brow and suggests they hold a vote to decide who will be the sacrifice. Another student agrees with the idea, noting that a democratic vote is exactly how they resolve issues back at the academy. However, Arthur points out that for a vote to be effective, they first need specific criteria for selecting the prey, ensuring the group will actually respect the decision. A student with his hair tied in a ponytail aggressively steps forward, arguing that the weak should naturally be sacrificed, applying the cruel logic of the wild. His suggestion is met with angry protests from the crowd. A purple-haired girl with glasses fiercely shoots back, reminding him they are civilized humans, not wild animals. Tapping her temple coldly, she suggests instead that the unintelligent students should be sacrificed, arguing that stupid people will be of no help to their survival. The student with the ponytail takes deep offense and argues that even without smarts, he has wealth. He desperately promises rich rewards to anyone who keeps him alive once they escape. The girl immediately shuts him down, harshly pointing out that his money is completely worthless in this hellscape. As the students bicker over who deserves to die, the four-eyed fairy watches from atop the plant, laughing sadistically at their civilized voting process and mocking them to reach a unanimous decision. Soon, a chilling consensus is reached, and the group's gaze shifts to the injured short-haired girl. Kneeling on the ground in a spotlight of doom, she stammers in terror, asking why they are choosing her. Her friend panics. She screams furiously at the crowd, demanding to know why her friend has to die while aggressively fighting to push them away. Sitting calmly on a nearby rock, Arthur clasps his hands and fakes a sympathetic expression. He tells the girls that it breaks their hearts to make such a grim choice, but he smoothly justifies the cruelty by claiming it is the fair result of a democratic vote. Arthur's expression grows cold as the shadows obscure his eyes, revealing his calculating nature. He explains that they have a long, grueling survival period ahead, and bluntly points out that the short-haired girl's bleeding leg makes her completely useless to the group's future. Leaning in with a manipulative smile, Arthur offers a hollow promise. He swears that once they escape, they will generously compensate her family and honor her as a hero. As the surrounding students begin to chant for her to accept her fate, Arthur softly but firmly begs her to become their sacrifice for the next day. The blonde girl fights desperately against two female students who grab her arms to hold her back. She screams furiously at the crowd, accusing them of losing their minds and questioning how this cruel decision can ever be considered a fair vote. Tears stream down her face as she calls out their hypocrisy. She yells that they are only using a majority vote to justify murdering an innocent classmate because they are all too terrified to die themselves. The short-haired girl's lips tremble as she breaks down entirely. Clasping her hands together in a desperate plea, she sobs uncontrollably, begging the crowd to spare her life just this once. Collapsing to her knees in the dirt, she cries out that she has parents and younger siblings waiting back home. With her blonde friend still struggling helplessly, the injured girl weeps that she cannot die here and desperately wants to live. In a frantic attempt to prove she isn't useless, the short-haired girl forces herself to stand. Her injured leg shakes violently under her weight as she tells the silent crowd to look at her, claiming she is perfectly fine and can walk without being a burden. However, the physical strain is too much. A fresh spray of blood erupts from beneath her heavy bandages, and her face twists in agonizing pain as her leg finally gives out completely. Just as she is about to hit the stone floor, a figure quickly emerges from the dust and catches her. Vikir firmly grabs her arm, supporting her failing body. The blonde girl gasps in shock, covering her mouth as Vikir orders the crowd to stop. Holding the exhausted girl in his arms, Vikir glares at the cowardly students with his glowing red eye and coldly declares that he will take her place as the monster's prey. Arthur looks down at Vikir, asking if he is really volunteering to be the sacrifice for the giant plant behind them. With his eye glowing a fierce red, Vikir calmly confirms his choice. Nearby, a blue-haired student overhears them and stares in shock. Finally recognizing Vikir's name, he recalls the wild rumors about him solving the killer ant mystery, earning a certificate from the Crown Prince, and destroying Professor Suddy's eye. Rumors also say he ranks 8th in the University League and has even destroyed an unbreakable artifact gate. Sweating nervously, he realizes the legend from those stories is standing right in front of them. Looking at the first year, the student suddenly remembers Vikir is the only one who warned them about the deadly flower earlier. He wonders how Vikir knows about the danger. As Vikir walks past the crowd, the boy watches in confusion, wondering why someone so strong would gladly offer to die. Arthur keeps a smug and composed face as he steps forward to block Vikir. Speaking to him directly, he formally introduces himself as the Student Council Vice President of Colosio Academy. Clasping his hands in fake sympathy, he praises Vikir for making the hard choice to take the girl's place. He notes her life is spared for now, but as Vikir gives him a cold stare, Arthur cruelly adds that she will only live until the next day. Arthur claims the group has already agreed to choose sacrifices through a fair vote. He states Vikir's choice will buy them time since Vikir will be the sacrifice tomorrow, and the injured girl will simply be sacrificed the day after. With an evil smile, Arthur mockingly thanks Vikir for his choice. Unbothered, Vikir stares back and points out the flaw in his logic. He questions the fairness of a vote meant only to decide who gets killed off. He directly challenges Arthur, asking if his own name is included in this supposedly equal vote. Arthur flinches, caught off guard for a moment by the direct question. Recovering his cool, Arthur argues that Vikir does not understand the situation because he has just arrived. He claims that by stepping up to stop the panic and manage the vote, he is naturally excluded from the sacrifice list. Vikir exposes Arthur's lies in front of the frightened survivors. He states that Arthur demands sacrifices while taking on a leadership role to keep himself safe from the very start. He then asks how Arthur can ever call that a fair system. The surrounding students begin to whisper in realization. Some point out that Arthur's name is never on the list, proving he never intends to risk his own life. Annoyed that the crowd is turning against him, Arthur silently curses the other students for talking too much. He then impatiently asks Vikir to get to the point. Arthur defends himself, claiming his leadership is needed to keep the group alive. He accuses Vikir of dividing the survivors over a fake sense of justice without having a real plan. He demands to know Vikir's idea, and Vikir says he will keep it simple. Vikir boldly declares that he is going to defeat the monster. Arthur loses his temper completely. Grabbing Vikir's collar, he furiously asks how a normal student can beat an S-rank monster. He warns that angering the beast will cause a rampage and shouts that the rest of the group will not help him. In response, Vikir calmly raises his hand and punches the stone wall right next to them. The sheer force of the punch creates a shock wave that completely shatters the wall. The surrounding students stare in absolute shock and terror at his impossible strength. The blast knocks Arthur onto his back in the falling rubble, his face pale with fear. Vikir confidently states that when tomorrow comes, he will kill the blood-water plantain lily monster himself. The surviving students move to the empty ruins of the Quo Vadis Old Testament faction church. Inside the crumbling building, the tired group rests on the stone steps. The quiet is suddenly broken by the horrible sounds of flesh being torn and cut from behind heavy wooden doors. The students cover their ears, and one cries out that the awful noise makes him want to throw up. Panic and fear fill the survivors. A boy grabs his head, terrified that interrupting Vikir will get them killed just like the shattered wall. The girl beside him trembles, agreeing that staying quiet through the awful sounds is their safest choice. Grenouille sweats nervously, remembering Vikir's strict order to guard the door and let no one in while he prepares for the hunt. Even though he obeys, he is deeply disturbed, wondering what Vikir is doing inside to make such noises. The other students glare suspiciously at Grenouille, questioning his sudden team-up with Vikir. The arrogant student with a ponytail breaks the tension, asking if anyone really believes Vikir. He notes that Vikir has taken all their random boxes and stat-boosting candies, so he can easily run away. The blue-haired student admits his doubts, but points out their harsh reality. He asks the group what they can even do to stop Vikir if he chooses to betray them. Remembering the sight of Vikir standing over a defeated Arthur, the students' faces twist in absolute terror as they fully realize how helpless they are. They remember Vikir's bold promise to kill the S-rank monster by himself. However, in exchange, he demands a huge price from the survivors. Vikir orders everyone to hand over their random gift boxes and stat-boosting candies, insisting he needs every single item they possess. The boy trembles at the memory. He realizes Vikir has the power to kill all of them, steal their items by force, and simply go to the next floor alone if he wants to. Staring at the closed doors, the blue-haired student guesses that the tower's rules are multiplying Vikir's physical power. This makes him 100 times stronger than in the real world. He darkly concludes that Vikir is hiding a terrible secret behind those heavy doors. 12 hours later, Vikir steps out into the ruined courtyard. His shoes tap lightly against the stone as the dust settles. The other students, including Arthur, watch him cautiously from behind the safety of the rubble. Peeking over a broken wall, Grenouille stares in disbelief at the space in front of the ruined church. He realizes the giant blood-water plantain lily monster has completely vanished. Vikir stands alone in the clearing as the four-eyed flower fairy guide appears on a high ledge. The fairy calls Vikir by name, revealing that the upper floor guides have already warned it about a crazy participant ruining the trials. Suddenly, a violent tremor shakes the courtyard. The sudden shaking sends the surrounding students running and screaming in panic. Soon, the ground explodes. A huge, terrifying mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth erupts from beneath the stone floor. Vikir stays completely calm as he stares up at the emerging beast. The ground continues to shatter as explosive dark energy and thick vines burst upward. The four-eyed fairy, now controlling the giant plant's true monstrous form, declares that Vikir's heroic run will end right there. Vikir just smirks, calmly brushing off the fairy's words. Seeing his total lack of fear, the fairy is shocked. Leaping backward under the moonlight, Vikir draws his glowing red blade and confidently states, "This is only the beginning." As he prepares to fight, the system updates his status. He is still level 1, but he gains the Hell Dog Slayer title. His stats receive a massive boost, pushing his strength to 260, stamina to 269, and agility to 229. His resistance and reflexes both sit at 1, leaving only one hidden trait still locked.